Let's move over to this middleweight scrap now, where we got Roman Kopylov coming in at plus 175, going up against Marco Tulio, who comes in at minus 205. Now, I'll start off on the Kopylov side of things, who's been struggling as of late. He is now on a 2-fight losing streak. He is also 2-3 over his last 5 fights, but you can give him some, cut him some slack for these losses that he's suffering, right? Anthony Hernandez, horrible stylistic matchup for Kopylov. We obviously see Hernandez end up getting the submission there. Kopylov bounces back with a Dagestani wrestling approach against Cesar Almeida the way that he did. He got that split decision. I thought it was pretty obvious that Kopylov won that fight. And then the Chris Curtis fight largely, has a big amount of success against Curtis in the striking realm and eventually gets that last second KO. A lot of hoopla about the stoppage and it being last second, but it's possible, or I don't think it's possible. I thought it was pretty clear that Kopylov was going to win that decision regardless. Then he goes into the Paulo Costa fight as a minus 200 favorite, and I think everybody was shocked to see that form of Paulo Costa, especially with seeing what Costa just did to Azamat Murzakanov. It seems like Costa has his motivation back. He's more than locked in, ready to go, and that was not a form of Costa that Kopylov was going to be able to defeat, and we saw Kopylov struggle tremendously with the power punching approach of Costa. Then he goes up against a similar fighter in Gregory Rodriguez, who, is a BJJ black belt, but is a guy that often looks to just walk opponents down and throw big power to try to get them out of there. And Kopylov was struggling. Although he did have some instances that he had some success, right? That first round wasn't a huge blowout for Rodriguez. I thought Kopylov had some moments there, but it was obvious Rodriguez won that round. The second round, it seemed like Rodriguez was really kicking it into gear, keeping Kopylov on the back foot, forcing Kopylov to shell up. Kopylov was throwing some counters in return, but it wasn't a whole lot that really deterred Rodriguez. But Kopylov, a guy who seemed like he was on the verge of breaking, really started to turn it on in the third round. Now, only one judge scored that round in his favor, but I thought he did a great job in terms of making up for that poor second round. He was throwing back. He was actually, moving forward a little bit more than he was prior to that fight. And I thought... he showed better cardio than I've seen from him in the past. That's one part of his game I've harped on a lot, is that he seems to slow down a lot, especially in deep water. But even though his body language doesn't look the greatest, he still goes out there, kicks it into the next gear, looks good enough to still either find the finish or still go on to win that third round. So that's 2 back-to-back fights now where he kind of didn't look all that good, right? He was getting outstruck, pretty much bullied in the striking round by both of those opponents. But, I still think he's capable of going out there and having very good performances and being the guy that was minus 200 going into the Paulo Costa fight. And if you've been following me long enough, you know that I've not been the biggest on Kopylov, but I'm willing to give him some grace here, especially on the 2-fight losing streak that he's on. We know he's a very good combination striker. We know he has nasty head kicks as well. He has the wrestling in his back pocket if he needs it, but he needs to make up for these last 2 performances that he's had. And I think he has a decent enough opponent here, Marco Tulio, to maybe pull off the upset. But let's talk about Marco Tulio first. Now, Tulio came in to the UFC off the second shot that he got on the Contender Series. If you guys remember, back in 2023, he did defeat Yusri Belgrui, who's obviously killing it in the UFC now. But that's a spot where we saw Tulio utilize his grappling heavily, hence why Dana didn't want to sign him after he ended up getting the decision win there. Goes back to the LFA, gets a knockout victory over a bum, gets another shot on the Contender Series in 2024, and comes through with a knockout over a French striker. That's enough for him to get into the UFC. Then he goes out there, knocks out Ihor Potieria. Okay, whatever. Goes out there, gets wobbled early by Trishan Gore, but managed to battle back in the same round. So much so that one judge even scored that first round at 10-8 for Tulio. Then he goes out there and gets the finish in the second round. Then he comes in as a minus 200 favorite against Christian Leroy Duncan. And that was one where I was salivating to get that plus money on Duncan. And I'm glad it came through the way that it did. Tulio seemed to be frightened of the striking of Duncan, so he started to go to his grappling and his clinch game, but it didn't work all that well for him as he lost the first round on all the scorecards, and then in that second round, it seemed like he was struggling a little bit. He was throwing some big shots, landing some decent shots on CLD, but it was clear CLD was in the driver's seat for that fight, and eventually landed that nasty spinning back fist that wobbled Tulio, and then he landed some follow-up shots that completely turned Tulio's lights out. I've been following Tulio since January of 2023, back in LFA 151, when that was the first time that I actually saw him fight. I was mediocrely impressed with him, right? I thought he was okay. His striking was still in a developmental stage. His grappling was still developing as well. Obviously looks good in terms of his physique, the power that he throws with. Kind of a power couple with Norma Dumont now as well. You guys saw him in Dumont's corner the other week. Telling Norma Dumont that she's up 2-0 going into the third round and confidently saying so as well, which I thought was absolutely absurd. That fight was much closer than Tulio was making it sound. So when we got that a reaction from Dumont when the decision was read, I thought it shouldn't have been that surprising. I thought Tulio was just giving her false information, honestly. But regardless, it seems like the public is really high on Tulio, hence why he finds himself as a minus 205 favorite going into this fight. I don't think that this is one where Tulio looks minus 205. Now, everybody seems to be expecting that Tulio is just going to walk Kopylov down, similar to what Gregory Rodriguez did, similar to what Paulo Costa did. But Tulio is not that type of striker. I don't think he has the confidence to walk through the counters of Kopylov. I think Kopylov will counter him. I think Tulio is way too hittable, and I think Kopylov will continue to sting Tulio. Throw this into the mix. With Tulio coming off such a bad knockout loss, who knows how confident he'll be in his hands and how confident he'll be willing to engage and utilize that forward pressure. Knowing the type of striking skills that Kopylov has, if he gets hit a few times, maybe he starts to break a little bit and that causes him some problems. So I know Kopylov hasn't been looking the greatest as of late, but I still think he is the better fighter here. I think his grappling will help him in case Tulio wants to take this fight to the ground. And then in the striking game, I think he's a slicker striker. And as long as his chin continues to hold up, like he's eaten some big shots and he stayed in the fight, throughout his UFC career. I think the only time he got finished was that loss to Carl Roberson in I believe it was his UFC debut. But that was, 7 years ago now? He's definitely become a much better fighter since then, and I still think he's better than Tulio here. So I'm going to go Kopylov. I think Kopylov pulls off the upset, and I think he even gets the knockout. So there you guys go. Roman Kopylov pulling off the upset here against Marco Tulio. Flame me in the comments all you want, but that's the spot that we're going with.